daughter of Zion, behold thy king cometh unto thee, humble and meek.
Cry out for the Lord, Son of David!
Master, you are the hope of Israel.
Said, I'm just going to concentrate this morning. I just want to take 2 days, and that's a kind of an odd message for this particular sermon. It is a Sunday Thursday message. A Sunday Thursday message. Well, that's kind of interesting. What am I talking about in this? Well, let me start with the first day, the Sunday. And in Sunday, I'm talking in the season of life, the Palm Sunday, the first Sunday, this Sunday, as we look at it. Thinking of what's going on. We tried to evoke the feeling a little bit this morning, a sense of excitement. You stood, you waited for something, and in come all the kids with the palm leaves, and before it's all done, you're waving them, and you look like a rock concert out there, only Old Testament style. And that's what was going on. There was this mass of people outside the city gates going, "Attaboy, Jesus. You're the Messiah. You're the one we're supporting." And it was massive popular opinion. Therein lies the principle of Sunday is watch out for popular opinion in your Christian walk. Watch out. In this whole thing of popular opinion, of even the excitement of starting a new ministry or something, and a whole bunch of attaboys, we can get caught up very quickly into people pleasing. And it's deadly. People pleasing instead of God pleasing. Now, say something that sounds a little bit provocative, but if your main goal in your Christianity is to help people, you're on the wrong foot. You're starting in the wrong direction. What do you mean? We're not supposed to help people? I'm not going to say that. I said if that is the core, if that's the primary thing, you're in trouble because it will take you down a road of people pleasing. Well, how can that be? Well, let me just reiterate from the life or illustrate from the life of Jesus. Let's move along just for a glimpse to the last of these days we're talking about when he's hanging on the cross. And people are taunting him and jeering at him and rejecting him. Even as he's dying for them, if his goal would have been to please people, it must have seemed like an awful disaster. Can you imagine if it was pleasing people was the primary thing, what he might have said as he hung on that cross? But instead he says this, he says, "It is finished." And in the English, that's kind of, dubious, or at least it could be taken in a number of ways. But in the Greek, it was very clear and profound in the same way because it was in two tenses. It was, it is finished in the past and it is finishing in the present. What he was doing was accomplished in the Father. Your salvation. It didn't finish on a cross. I mean, the sacrifice was finished, but the effect of it would continue down through the ages. It is still finishing with us and people to come after us. It was this. But it was a call of eternal triumph. And the reason it was eternal triumph is because his goal was not to please man, but to please the Father. And in pleasing the Father, he could properly love people. In pleasing the Father, then he could properly love people. The thing is that if pleasing people becomes our thing, we're going to be disappointed. And we're going to stumble on that. And we may become very jaded. How many people have left the church body because, well, others didn't appreciate them? Well, maybe they didn't. But that isn't the call. You're not here to please me. I'm not here to please you. I am here to share life with you and you with me. But to do that first, we both have to be pleasing the Father. Then everything else will fall into place. Then everything else will become kingdom-side. sides. The great danger of the Sunday of this season that we look at is in that excitement and success story people look for. It's in losing yourself to popular opinion. Losing yourself to popular opinion. And that could be positive or negative. But you can't lose yourself from this relationship. This makes this relationship. That can happen in the Sunday, so beware. The Thursday message, as we move on to, well then let's move on to the Thursday, what's going on there. And in those wee hours of a transition between Thursday and Friday, Jesus is out there, and one thing he is doing is wrestling in prayer with the Father. And he says in Luke 22:42 to the Father, saying, Father, if it is your will, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And we might discuss what was Jesus doing, trying to back out? Was he seeing an alternative that maybe could be done? Let's do an alternative to all of this. But we looked at it last week a little more closely, and we saw without any doubt, with the body of evidence from Scripture, there was no plan B. There was the cross. So Jesus knew that. There was never another plan, but the cross had to be done. So he knew that. So why the statement of if the cup can pass from me? And in early service, a number of the smarties in there, as we shared, said, well, God in his humanness, because Jesus was fully human and fully God at the same time. It's one of the great mysteries of the Christian faith. It took the church a long time to be able to put it in those words, but that's it. He is fully God and fully human. And in his humanness, the weight of the reality laid down on him. Maybe you were in this situation yourself. Ever been in there? It might be something as simple as going to the dentist. It might have been surgery or something. And you knew this thing was coming up. It had to be done. And you were kind of dreading it. But it never really hit you until you get into the doctor's or the dentist's office and you smell that chloroform and stuff. And all of a sudden you go, oh no, I really got to do this. And the reality of it hits you. You knew all along, and you knew you had to do it, but it is then the full weight of reality comes down on you. In a much greater way, that's exactly what happened to Christ. And it was going to be an ugly number of hours before it was all over. It was going to be some nasty stuff. And the full weight of it came down, and he said, if this cup could pass from me, may it be so. But he knew not my will, but the Father's will. Well, that was Jesus. What's the principle in there for us then? What can we take from that? And it's a tough and it's a profound principle. And depending where you are in your Christian walk, it may be even a hard one to take. But I'm going to share it with you anyway. And it's this. It starts with this that's, seems pretty logical. The greater the calling, the greater the accomplishment. Well, that makes sense. If God calls you to something that's very, very important and you see it through, then a great thing is accomplished. You can understand that. The thing that we may not notice as much as this, or it takes us time to learn, is the more the calling, the more we carry. The higher the mission, the higher the mountain. The greater the wonder, the greater the weight. And I want to get this across in the right spirit. I'm not saying that some folks in here will have a great calling and some of the rest of us are just kind of a humble calling. So glad I'm not one of those great calling people. I've got to carry more weight. Which is true. In a great calling, in a great mission God puts before you, a significant mission, that'll be the case. But here's the thing. It happens to everyone. In your life, as you walk with Christ, there will be some things that are milestone missions in your life. There'll be the daily carrying of the cross, but God has this way of bringing across these things that if you see them through, major things are changed. For someone, it might be taking on a mentorship of a child in your neighborhood or something, and you just decided you're going to invest your time, and you'll change your life and touch a person like nobody else could. For someone else, maybe it was the adoption of a child. For someone else, it might be a disease that is life-threatening, and you may not get through it, and you may suffer a lot even before that healing of the chemo or whatever takes place. But when you come out the other side, you have a testimony, oh man, you can share with a lot of people in a powerful way. But you had to go through the low point in order to have that thing accomplished. And that's what we're talking here in this. It's wonderful having the vision of a new mission, a new something coming along. And that's kind of the Sunday thing. Well, take on a youth program or do this or do that, and everybody's attaboy, go for it. They're waving their palm branches to you. Go on and do that thing, and that's fine. But then there comes the time the crowd's not there anymore. And you're not seeing all the support to do your thing you expected. And it may even be the naysayers may come out and even kind of add thorns to the whole scenario. There's a time that it was exciting starting this ministry, but now it's not so exciting after trying to run it for several months, and the work's getting hard, and you just don't feel so inspired. You're starting to feel tired. You're starting to feel bored. You wish you could say to God, take this cup from me. Can somebody else do this? But He's called you to do whatever that thing is. Or it could be God can give you something in your life, and it all of a sudden hits you the impact this could have. And you go, what if I fail? What if I fail at this? Maybe you should give this cup to someone else, God. This one's a little too big, a little too deep for me. There's a lot of reasons that can come on you, and the weight of the calling comes down. It's a high calling, but a heavy weight. The spiritual reality of the Thursday, that's where Jesus was in His Thursday. And the principle is this: the higher the calling, the lower the point you're likely to face somewhere along the way. The higher the calling, the lower the point you're likely to face somewhere along the way. And Jesus Himself warns us in this. He says in Luke 14:28, "For which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down and first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all who seek it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build but was not able to finish." Pointing out this to you, that God has high callings, but don't be surprised in the reality with the high calling does come. The burden of the reality of it too. It's just there. Be prepared. Well, any sane person maybe out there thinking, well, if there's this burden to carry on, maybe I really don't want to take on this high calling when it comes along. Why engage? Why risk it in this thing? Why do it at all? Oh, that would be a good question. Why should you? Why should you? I mean, even from the personal side, why should you? Just quickly, 2 reasons I'd like to tell you why to take that calling. First is this, for starters, Luke 14:27. "And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple." The whole thing, and this is this, in Christianity, it's unfortunate in churches that we seem to have this idea there's the playing field and the sidelines. We've got ministers and trained leaders, now they're on the field and the rest of us are on the sidelines. In the Christian walk, there are no sidelines. No matter what our Western church tends to put across to us, there is the game or there's nothing. You're either in it or you're not in it at all. There are no sidelines. There are no sidelines. But the thing is, it's more than just what you stand to lose, it's what you stand to gain. What you stand to gain. 2 Timothy 4:8 is Paul's encouraging young Timothy in his ministry. He says, "In heaven a crown is waiting for me, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on that great day of His return." And not just to me, but to all those whose lives show that they are eagerly looking forward to His coming back again. We could go on and talk about what that crown might be, but the bottom line is there is a reward that is unimaginable to us. As a matter of fact, the crown is kind of a figure of speech because we don't have anything to compare what that reward is to us in our experience of this life as it is. But we have to be eagerly awaiting. And how are we eagerly waiting for this? We are eagerly walking with God right now, and we're walking all the way. We've counted the cost, and we're finishing the race. That's what it's all about. We want to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." But it's following the call God's way. Doing it God's way, not our way. That's what it's all about. Well, it sounded like kind of a rock and a hard place, isn't it? I just told you there's a danger in all of this, and that if you're going to see what God has for you, you have to take the challenge. You have to do it. Well, then how can we ensure you succeed? How can we ensure that you succeed? Once again, just quickly throwing out 3 simple things. Three simple things, starting with this, is, we already said, counting the cost. Counting the cost. Knowing that there is a cost beforehand. There is going to be a challenge. There is weight to carry. But you know, Jesus says, my yoke is light. What's all this about a cost? His yoke is light because you love it and you love him. But the terrain that you may have to cross with that yoke, some of it gets pretty rough. Be ready for the cost. Second thing would be this: celebrate what is in you. Celebrate what is in you. This here's almost sounds like one of those motivational speeches, but that's not where I'm going. David said before he was even formed, God knit together the parts. He knew his purpose. He knew what he was designing David for. God knew before you were ever made. He was designing, even in talk about genetic engineering, that was going on to make you who you are. So you could use those natural talents to the purpose of your life that God has waiting for you. And it doesn't stop there. It's not just when you were born. Then when you are reborn, that is when you make that deliberate choice, that conscious choice, and accept Christ inside, his ways, his spirit, and live in and through him. Then there are spiritual gifts that come along. And those spiritual gifts, you know what? They're really good for nothing else but kingdom work. They are only for that. It's not that God gives you the gift of teaching and so go out and get your diploma. The idea is in the gift of teaching, God gives you something, no matter what your level of education, that somehow you can communicate God's Spirit to other people, his principles to other people. And in the preaching is the same thing. It is that in some way you are compelled through Christ, with Christ in you, to go and communicate. That was the gift you were given, communication. For others, a gift of help helps. And we see that there's people who just seem to know when others, especially in the body, need something. And they're kind of amazing. They're just like, this person, and somehow they're there and they're taking care of that type of thing. There's gifts of administration. There's all kinds of gifts. But what they do is make the church body stronger itself, and then they help in the outreach to the rest of the world. There are gifts that can be taken, but you've got to know they're there. You've got to believe they're there. And you've got to look for them. And you've got to be active in trying to engage them. That's how you really celebrate what's in you, is take what is in you and use it to good purpose. And the more you use it to good purpose, the stronger and the more honed and the sharper it will become. Celebrate what's in you. And that last little thing is this: resolve before you ever start. Count the cost. Know that it isn't all a bed of roses. In fact, that's why in much of what Paul writes, he says, count it a joy when you suffer. Well, what kind of nonsense is that? That sounds demented. But the truth of it is that knowing in some of the suffering, some of the burdens that we will go through will be the strongest blessings in the long run in our life. Because you had that cancer, now you have a testimony. Because you struggled and lost sleep over this person as you were mentoring them, their life has changed, and they go on to change someone else. Through your suffering, just like through his. Resolve to face it as you start.